Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this session, Cooperation in Power. It's fantastic to see so many of you joining us this evening. My name's Sharon Taylor. I'm very proud to have been a Labour and Co-op councillor for 24 years now. I've been leader of Stevenage Borough Council for 15 years, and in case any of you don't know where Stevenage is, it's Britain's first new town, first post-war new town. We're just about 28 miles north of London. And we are the very proud hometown of Roland Butcher, who's a cricketer. If you like golf, Ian Poulter, who's a golfer. Ashley Young, who's a footballer. And probably the most famous sports person from our town is Lewis Hamilton, who has just won his 8th World Championship. So lots of famous sports people from Stevenage. Now, all 27 members of my majority group in Stevenage are Labour and Cooperative councillors, and I'm very proud of that too. And one of my very proudest achievements is to be a founder of the Cooperative Councils Network with Steve Reed and Jim McMahon. Our network, which now has 99 members, and we always say it's the fastest growing network in local government, but I can't actually prove that, so it has to be a bit of a Carlsberg claim, that one. We have 32 councils in membership now, 9 million citizens covered by our councils, and a £14 billion budget. And seeing our councils across the country, from Hull to Cardiff, from Edinburgh to Plymouth, and including some of the biggest councils in the UK, Birmingham and the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, acting in such a cooperative way alongside our town and community councils, who are also members, has been incredible. They're all building on the firm foundation of our 7 cooperative principles to improve the lives of their communities, and essentially doing that with the people we serve, not to them. And that makes every day a day to celebrate our co-op difference. This year, we published our case studies on cooperation through the COVID-19 crisis, reading those good practice examples of councillors across the country leading, supporting and protecting our communities shows that although COVID has been a terrible, dark period in our history, the spirit of community and cooperation that has emerged, my firm view is that will be enduring. We will be able to build on that for a better future for our country, a fairer economy, social justice and tackling climate change. So to go back to Stevenage briefly, we're the UK's genuine space city. The Mars rover is built here in Stevenage. And I'm telling you this because Corny Link coming up here, but because we have an absolutely stellar lineup of speakers for you tonight. And I'm going to introduce them all to you in a moment. But just, I know we're all very used now to operating on Zoom, but just to let you know how the session will work. Everyone will be muted unless you are called to speak. If you do have questions, you can either put them in the chat and the chat line, or you can put your hand up when the time comes for the Q&A. Either way is fine. They'll get to us. So you'll all be muted until you're called to ask a question. Our speakers are going to speak for around 10 minutes each, and then we'll take a Q&A at the end of that. So as I said, a stellar lineup tonight. We've got Jo Fortune, who is the General Secretary of the Cooperative Party. I've known Jo for many, many years, a great champion of our party, the Cooperative Party, but also our cooperative movement. Mayor Andy Burnham from Greater Manchester, and we've all seen Andy fighting for his community during the COVID crisis. Rosa Bolger, I've known Rosa for a long time too. She's from Whitney Town Council, and Rosa is a fantastic champion of her people there in Whitney. And Whitney is obviously was the hometown of one David Cameron, and nevertheless, Rosa and her colleagues there have made a real impact, and that's fantastic to see. Councillor Matthew Brown, the leader of Preston Council, and Matthew and his team in Preston have really been the UK's leading champions of community wealth building and cooperative approaches to local economies. And Tudor Evans, the inimitable leader of Plymouth City Council, fantastic cooperative stuff going on in Plymouth. And Tudor, of course, known for his amazing culinary skills. So I don't know whether he's going to talk about that tonight, but you can all catch him on doing his fish cookery online. So I know you'll all be interested to see that later on. So a fantastic lineup of speakers, and we're going to start this evening hearing from Joe Fortune, the General Secretary of the Cooperative Party. Joe, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sharon, and thank you very much for that introduction. Some facts there of Stevenage I wasn't aware of, but certainly am now. And I also look forward to Tudor's recipe cards later through the event. But look, other than that, it's fantastic to be given a couple of minutes just to say hello from the party and from myself. I really look forward to listening to this fantastic panel in this event tonight. Cooperation and power is what we're all about as a political party. We need cooperative voices at decision-making tables right across the country. You know, in order to express our cooperative values, to express our principles, that is what we need to achieve. We need to achieve those levers of power in order to make the sort of changes that we know that we can and we must do to communities, our friends and families in every part of this country. Within the Cooperative Party, we're incredibly ambitious to grow our voice and influence as well. And we're ambitious because for two good reasons. The first is our firm conviction within our values and principles. We know that they hold the key to a fairer and better society. We know that this is the case, and therefore we have to be ambitious for our influence and our voice. And we're also ambitious for our cooperative movement. We believe we will all benefit from its growth and development. We need to be ambitious. We need that cooperative movement to be strong, healthy, and growing for the benefit of us all. So these are the reasons why we have this ambition within the Cooperative Party. I think that 2020 showed some of this ambition and this work. You know, if we look at some of the features of 2020 in some ways, in some of these ways, if you like, and we got 30,000 new supporters working with the Cooperative Party day in, day out through 2020. We enjoyed the biggest single year for membership increase in our history from the Cooperative Party. We had tens of thousands of people who joined our campaign and work, you know, really making sure that our movement's views are known on issues such as fair tax, fair trade, retail worker violence and food justice. You know, a real width and depth to our work, a real sort of bang for the cooperative movement coming from the Cooperative Party in 2020, and I want more of it in 2021 and beyond. Pre-pandemic, our elected representatives have given us much reason for pride as well. You know, this wasn't just a pandemic moment where we realised that our elected representatives were so crucial to what we were seeking to achieve. No, of course not. Pre-pandemic, whether it's working to tackle modern slavery, whether it's leading food justice efforts, standing up for our colleagues in cooperative stores, developing the community wealth building models already mentioned, or promoting and defending the cooperative movement in its many guises at every opportunity, day in, day out. That is why I'm proud of our elected representatives at all levels of government in all parts of the country. And that's why I need and want for more. I think that the pride I had did increase through the pandemic and the public health crisis in which we're living through. I mean, I've been amazed and bowled over by the work that we've been able to spotlight, to highlight, to support within the Cooperative Party of our cooperative representatives right across the country. I truly believe that through this period of time, their cooperative values and principles have shone through and made a real difference to the way in which they've treated and acted within power right across the country. And some of the great examples of that I know that we're going to hear from tonight as well. So some of those are the reasons why we need many more people like our panelists tonight. And I've mentioned our ambition for that. And I just want to give you a sense of where we're up to going into these elections in 2021. We're now at a point where we've got 550 councillor candidates in England and counting. That number is increasing a day on day. I've just been hearing that there's just in the green room ahead of this event that there's lists coming in from other panelists and hosts today as well. So 550. We've got 5 Metro Mayor candidates up for election in 2021. We've got 31 Police and Crime Commission candidates, 17 London Assembly candidates, 20 candidates going for the Welsh Assembly and 20 plus in Scotland as well. Look, the result of all of that is that we are going into a set of elections in which tens of millions of electors will have Labour and cooperative candidates in front of them for the first time. Tens of millions. Our previous high just to give a sense of scale, was in 2017, where we had 3 million electors with Labour and cooperative candidates in front of them. We're going to have tens of millions. Well, look, if we look at this in terms of what does that mean around the country, 100% of voters in Wales will have at least one Labour and cooperative candidate on the ballot. 100% of voters in Scotland will have at least one cooperative candidate on the ballot. 85% of voters in England will have one Labour and cooperative candidate to choose from in the ballot paper in these coming weeks. Now, that is fantastic in terms of where we are off to in terms of our ambition, but it's not the end. It's not where the journey finishes at. This is in order to bring forward the cooperative change that I'm looking forward to hearing about later in this event. We've got to make sure ourselves as cooperators, the party, the team, the elected representatives, our entire hinterland family, we have to make sure that we are doing as much as we can to spread that cooperative influence, increase those cooperative candidates and elected representatives in a small number of weeks to come. Some of the things that I point towards from the party's point of view, which we have developed and are available, I hope that you all make as much use of as you possibly can. Some of the digital tools and training that we now provide, I encourage you to look into that, maybe not even for this time, but for next time as well, making sure that you're making as much use as the campaign and support, digital and in practical support that we give as well. Signing up to the cooperative phone bank sessions that we run, making sure you use the new joint Labour and cooperative materials available from the Labour Party in England. For the first time, you can order off the shelf at the Labour Party joint Labour and cooperative materials, which talks about the Cooperative Party, talks about our values and principles, talks about our key election themes. We've already seen thousands of those direct mails and leaflets being ordered, and I encourage you to make that tens of thousands and indeed more in the weeks to come as well. Of course, some of those campaigning pieces have got to be backed up with our ideas and our manifestos and our plans for post-election. Some of the numbers I've talked about, some of the ambition I talk about is all well and good, unless we are then making sure that post-election it is cooperative values and principles, cooperative policies, which then go forward into action. So I look forward to making sure that we are as influential as we can be in manifestos right across the country as well. We've got to get some of our post-election priorities come across within the themes. Some of our 5 election themes, if you look at what we are putting out within the party, and you'll see much more of in the coming weeks, we're talking about high streets, we're talking about building fairer local economies from our high streets, from our town centres, we're talking about tackling food poverty, encouraging community ownership, and indeed fair tax as well. That's not where the limit of the things that we're going to be working on post-election, but there's some of the things that I'm really looking forward to working with many of you on the call today to follow through, be able to be proud of the difference that we've made post-election as much as we have pre-election as well. So look, Sharon, I wasn't given 10 minutes. I think I may have taken close to 10 minutes, so forgive me. I'm gonna take the seat, listen in to the rest of the event, but thanks very much for the opportunity to say hello tonight as well.
Thank you, Joe. Brilliant, enthusiastic as ever, being the real champion of our cooperative party and our cooperative movement. And of course, it's great to see so many people will have the option to vote for a cooperative candidate at this massive set of elections we've got coming up. We already have, is it 26 MPs we've got in the House of Parliament? So we've got, you could say we're the 4th biggest party in the Houses of Parliament, which is fantastic. And we've got lots of people in the House of Lords as well. So we are there at every step of the legislature. So that's fantastic news. And you definitely win the prize, Joe, in the Co-op Party for the best face mask of this campaign. I've seen cooperators all over the country with the pack that comes as a co-op councillor candidate wearing their face mask. So well done for those, because they're just brilliant. So thank you for that. And I'm delighted now that we've been joined by Mayor Andy Burnham from Greater Manchester. Andy, you do an amazing job there in Manchester. We've all seen you taking on the government throughout this COVID crisis, fighting for the people of Manchester and for what they need. You've always been a great cooperator. You and I have had many discussions over the years about cooperation, and seeing your cooperative commission taking place across the Greater Manchester Combined Authority was a joy for all of us to see, and I know you've been making great strides because of that. So can I hand over to you now, Andy Burnham? Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Sharon. It's a lovely introduction, and I'm all fired up now after Joe. I want to get out there. Did the job for me anyway. So thank you, Joe. And it's a real pleasure to join so many good colleagues and friends, cooperators tonight, and particularly Rosa, Tudor, and and Matthew from Preston. And I think we've all been inspired, haven't we, by what Matthew is doing. That was brilliant, that 550 figure that Joe gave us. You know, it's a fantastic showing, isn't it? And I think it's a really important election for us. Just to echo what Joe was saying about the need to get out there and get the word out and get behind those candidates. I'm still a bit amazed that this election's going ahead in May, if I'm honest with you. And all I can conclude is that the Tories are banking on the fact that a low turnout will help them. You know, that's what I think there is behind there. So don't let their plan succeed, disrupt it, and get the word out there and get people signed up for postal votes. And let's put a real good showing in, because I think this is a really important election for who will capture the post-pandemic mood. It's an opportunity, I think, for the cooperative movement, and particularly the Cooperative Party, that we've not had in a long time. Because I think the wind is with us, the mood is with us, and I think we need to speak to that mood and capture that mood. And certainly, I'm standing proudly as a Cooperative Party mayor at this election, and we'll make sure that people know that I'm standing as a Cooperative Party mayor. When I say capture the mood, you know, what we've seen is some communities have been hit very hard indeed, haven't they, by the last 12 months. And it's because, in some ways, wealth has been taken out of those places over the years. If you go back and trace it right back through the sort of 80s and then the 70s and the 60s, those places have had their wealth slowly taken out of them. The structures that supported those communities dismantled. And therefore, they were exposed to this pandemic. The nature of people's employment in those communities didn't allow them to put their health first when it came to being able to self-isolate. Their housing isn't good enough and doesn't create a safe environment for them. And it's the same places that, you know, have always suffered in that way. And the message we've got to give out is, don't wait forever to the government to come along and level up these places. We've got to help them level up themselves, haven't we? And we've got to kind of work with the collective knowledge that we have on this call tonight to put into practice policies that will start to level up those places, improve the quality of work, keep more wealth within those communities, improve housing, reduce the costs of housing. We've got the solutions. It's a case of saying that we now can put those solutions into practice. And the reason why I say the mood might be with us, you know, if you look at that on the one hand, in terms of the way the poorest people in the poorest places have suffered over the last 12 months, look at it from the other end of the telescope, in terms of the richest. Oxfam put some research out in January this year. I don't know if you saw it, because it kind of didn't get the attention it deserved, in my view. But they found that the top 10 richest people in the world had seen their collective wealth increase by $500 billion over the last 12 months. They have profited massively out of the pandemic. If you take one of those individuals, the owner of Amazon, he saw an increase in his personal wealth such that he could pay a $105,000 bonus to all 876,000 of his employees and not be any worse off than he was at the start of the pandemic. Just think about those figures. They are absolutely mind-boggling, aren't they, in terms of the system that we have and the way it is massively enriching those who are already beyond what anyone can imagine is wildly wealthy. And that inequality is growing and building all of the time. And I think the generation that's coming, the younger generation, don't subscribe to a world that is that unequal in terms of the share of wealth. They want wealth to be more fairly shared across everybody. And this is what our values speak to. And it's our opportunity, as I say, to capture that post-pandemic mood and win people over to cooperative ideals. One thing I would say, and I would ask colleagues on the call to do what you can to support this, is to make the case for devolution as a cooperative and labour movement, because I think there's been a sort of ambivalence about devolution, particularly in the Labour Party. Still too much of a centralising tendency at times. Whereas if you take power out of Westminster and vest it in the hands of not just regions, but local authorities, really forward-thinking local authorities like Tudors or Matthews or others on this call, that is probably creating the best conditions that you can for cooperation. The more that you take political power out of SW1A, OAA, and put it in the hands of people at the most local level. I think Metro mayors are moving into this territory, Sharon. It's great that we've got so many Metro mayor candidates. We've got Tracy standing in West Yorkshire. If you think about it, Steve Rotherham, myself, and then Tracy along the M62, you're building out a sort of power base there that has got scale and can actually then work at scale to promote cooperative ideals. And I just think we need to, as part of this election, make the case for devolution, because I think the devolution of power to the English regions is to create the foundations for cooperation and to bring power closer to people so that communities can then use that power. And I would just say, let's see if we can put that into our election. A year ago, January 2020, you mentioned the commission that we set up, Sharon. It concluded its work, a cooperative Greater Manchester, and there's so many fantastic ideas within it, making Greater Manchester a cooperative zone. We're setting up a cooperative innovation co-op in Greater Manchester to start to support new ventures within areas like the gig economy, fibre, student cooperative homes, electric vehicle charging, looking at some of the examples that there are in this country and internationally. So we are ready to go, and it will be a big part of our recovery plan to get, we were interrupted, of course, but now we will be getting the Commission's recommendations back in place and really ready to go as part of the response to the pandemic. But we have already got some great examples to look at. Rochdale Borough Council are pioneering the Middleton Community Cooperative. I don't know if colleagues know about what's going on there, but a huge amount happening out of Middleton. In my former constituency of Lee, and Jo Platt, who's a colleague who will be known to many people, she's leading a project called Lee Spinners Mill, which is a local co-op. In Abram in Wigan, a lot of the Abram Community Co-op. Chorlton, there's lots of co-ops springing up. So there's loads of new activity springing up on the ground, and we've got to sort of put energy behind it. And actually, obviously we are modestly the home of the cooperative movement. We don't mention that very often, do we, on calls like this? But you might know that Greater Manchester has just given its second biggest gift to the cooperative movement since we created it, and that's Rose Marley, who is now Chief Executive of Cooperatives UK. For those of you who don't know Rose, she's on the call tonight, a force of Mancunian nature, and she will certainly bring some new energy to things. So everything is lining up well, isn't it? The conditions are there for us to have a really good election, put forward some new ideas. Sharon, I remember you and I used to talk years ago, and I know I can see other friends from this era on the call, Elaine as well, Elaine Dean, when we were setting up Supporters Direct, when we were promoting supporter-owned trusts at football clubs across the country, and talking about capturing a mood and a moment. My goodness, that did that, didn't it? We used a sort of a crisis in football to bring through a huge number of supporter-owned cooperative supporters trusts, and actually took cooperative values to that new demographic, if you like, younger, particularly young men of a certain age who then were introduced to the cooperative movement. We've got to kind of almost feed off that example as we come out of through this election into the recovery phase, and get our barge others out of the way a little bit. I know cooperatives don't like doing that, but we do need to do a bit of that and say, look, let's have a cooperative recovery from this pandemic, one where everybody benefits, not just the wealthiest getting wealthier. Why doesn't everyone share in the wealth that we create coming out of this? If we're going to be retrofitting people's homes to make them zero carbon, let's have cooperatives within communities doing that, employing local young people doing that. If we're going to build a digital economy, well, let's have some more digital co-ops laying that fibre in our communities. So it's going to have to be a cooperative recovery as well as, you know, a green recovery. And I'm really up for it, and I hope you are as well. Greater Manchester will continue to play our part, but we'll do it with all of you, networking with you all, and seeing if we can capture this moment in time for the good of the cooperative movement. I'm certainly up for that. I hope all of you are too, and I'll hand back to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Andy. And as ever, you know, Manchester fully playing its role in our movement, as it always, well, the movement started there. I know there's some Scots people who might have a disagreement about that, but we'll go with Rochdale for tonight. But fantastic contribution you all make there to our cooperative working. And your point about Amazon, it just struck me that, you know, while Jeff Bezos is handing out 155,000 to each of his employees, we over here are arguing in Parliament about whether kids who are on free school meals get any food in the school holidays, and whether we are prepared to continue a £20 a week, £20 a week uplift to universal credit. That's how skewed our economy is here, and we've got to change that, and it does feel like the moment to do that. So I'm sure we're going to hear some great examples again from our other speakers. And I'm meeting Rose. I haven't met Rose yet, but I'm meeting her I think later on this week. So that's fantastic. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker now. This is Councillor Rosa Bolger from Whitney Town Council. I know Rosa, amongst other things, is a great environmental champion, but she also is a great community champion, and I look forward to hearing from you, Rosa. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Sharon. How great to be here tonight alongside so many wonderful cooperators, particularly those in local government. So yeah, as Sharon said, I'm Rosa. I sit in opposition as a councillor on West Oxfordshire District, but I'm also a councillor on Whitney Town Council. And tonight I'm going to share our story of how in our True Blue constituency, we painted our rural market town of Whitney red and purple by taking control of the town council that had been conservative for as long as any of us can remember. I'll speak about COVID recovery and the importance of cooperative values and how they transform into community action and ultimately into local election success, particularly in our more rural areas where extreme wealth and extreme poverty sit side by side, often cut off from the resources of the larger towns and cities. So I'd been a West Oxfordshire District Councillor for just about a year when I had the opportunity to also stand for Whitney Town Council. And at this point, I understood more about how opposition could shape the policies of the ruling party. So I realised we could achieve a lot more for Whitney if we had more Labour and cooperative voices on our town council too. Some view town councils as a step down, but to me, they really are of equal importance. I believe wholeheartedly in the value of bottom-up politics and in the potential of an empowered community. So we led our campaign on grassroots Labour and cooperative values, working with our residents to make sure they were part of what we were working towards. We produced the first ever Labour and cooperative local manifesto. It was ambitious, it punched above its weight, it had drive, commitment and creativity. We led community campaigns fighting for the issues that really affected our town and building on years of work from our existing Labour and cooperative councillors. I really believe that when a community is heard, they can find unity and their collective voice is elevated. They see our care, they see our commitment, and they see our hard work, and ultimately we win their trust. In Whitney, the people saw this and they voted for change. So we went from holding just 2 seats to taking control of the council. So we now have a Labour and cooperative controlled council in David Cameron's backyard. Yes, at town and parish level, we have limited power, but what we do have is the voice of our community, and it really doesn't get stronger than that. As a councillor, let me tell you that it's really hard to get a hearing for local government. And further to that, within local government, metro mayors, they tend to steal the focus. I'm sure you'll agree with that, Andy. And then beyond that, we've got our counties, which is awful because they're often Tory. And then it's our districts. And then finally, way down at the very bottom of the pile, we've got our smallest councils, our town and parish councils. But thanks to Jackie Weaver, at least they've had a little prominence recently. But although they are small, they can be mighty. Smaller is closer to our communities And when it comes to tackling our climate crisis in particular, small and mighty is crucial. So we made tackling the climate crisis one of our main priorities. Our small rural town council declared a climate emergency. And we didn't do this as an act of lip service or to go along with a national trend. We did this because we truly believe that if we're going to properly tackle the climate emergency, we must work at all levels of local government by engaging with our communities. As a small town council, we don't have the capacity or the resource to carry out a big citizens' assembly. So we had to be more creative than that. So pre-COVID, we held a public meeting, we packed out our corn exchange, and we included high profile speakers. Some you'll know, Tom Hayes from Oxford, a great cooperator there. They spoke on climate change. Following that, we held a public policy building session, allowing our residents to really be part of the proud work that we're doing in our town, and also all the time building up these community networks. Many of these residents have continued to be involved. They attend our newly formed climate committee, and they contribute and they bring their expertise. We've also held a car-free day in Whitney to encourage residents into active travel and to use public transport, like our member-owned bus co-op. And in Whitney, we have active energy citizens, people who are investing in community energy projects, like Oxfordshire's Low Carbon Hub, a local collaborative of over 40 organisations from private, public and not-for-profit sectors that are responsible for over half of the city's carbon dioxide emissions. It has been created, co-funded and coordinated by Oxford City Council, a Labour council who refuses to accept that £1.5 billion is leaving our county annually to the big six energy companies. And then last year, the pandemic hit us, perhaps making tackling the climate crisis more prominent, with an emphasis on active travel and low traffic neighbourhoods, and bringing greater focus on the places we live, and particularly making us notice the people we live next door to, but also making the economic divide in our communities more glaringly obvious. It's punished those in lower paid and unsteady work, and those in insecure housing, and those with care responsibilities, and in particular, women. It's absolutely crucial that as we enter a recovery period, we look to rebuild our economy, both locally and nationally. We must resist further austerity cuts and resist any more belt tightening. Instead, we must nurture a new bottom-up economy, focusing on building wealth within our communities. And we must maintain our newfound neighbourhood support systems by simply being kind and helping each other. I've experienced the power of community, both as a local councillor and by working with volunteers to set up the Whitney Baby Bank. We did this in response to the COVID crisis. As the pandemic engulfed us, many families found themselves struggling to access the basics they need. So we set up the Whitney Baby Bank to provide families with essential baby items and women with menstrual products free of charge. We've built a relationship with our local Home Start branch and to make sure that we're really supporting the families that need us the most. From the few families in our town that we set out to help, we've been able to grow our support to provide to a large number of families right across West Oxfordshire. At the end of last year, we launched our Christmas gift appeal to ensure that no child in our community went without something under their tree through the holiday season. We asked our community to donate toys and gifts for children aged 0 to 18. And within just 72 hours, we received such an incredible quantity of donations of new toys, books, gift cards, bath products and clothes for teenagers, and even brand new scooters. Local supermarkets donated wrapping paper and sellotape. So we formed an army of volunteers ready to wrap and deliver. And as the donations continued to roll in, we found ourselves in a position to give to more than just the families that we currently supported at the Baby Bank and those that were supported by Home Start. So we worked with our schools and our nurseries, giving them the opportunity to request gifts for children in their care who they thought might benefit from the initiative. The week before Christmas, our army of volunteers wrapped and delivered over 1,000 presents to over 300 children right across our district. Now, when we set up the Baby Bank, we thought it might be a temporary measure to help families through the initial lockdown. but it's very clear now that this issue is not going away anytime soon. Of course, we can continue to support families through the baby bank, and we're pleased to do that. And we're pleased that our Christmas gift initiative gave some much needed joy to our community. But ultimately, there needs to be more support for struggling families, more than can be provided by local communities and local volunteers. Support has to come from central government. And as Andy said, that has to be devolved to local authorities where necessary. This is something that we really haven't seen in today's budget announcements. Since starting the baby bank, it's startlingly obvious how many families need this extra support. But it's also utterly heartwarming to see the number of volunteers that have come forward and offered their time and their generous donations. These people are the key to a successful rebuild. They're our community cooperators. Let's bring them in and let's work with them to prove the value of strong community. Whatever their current political alignment, they'll come to see that cooperation and social equality founded on a vibrant bottom-up economy is the politics we should all be aiming for. I truly believe that our cooperative values are the key to a successful COVID recovery, and that local government is best placed to nurture this. If we can deliver this message to voters this May, we'll see Labour and cooperative gains right across our country.
That's brilliant, Rosa. Thank you so much. And you inspire us all. And we all know that people respond best to the things they see when they walk out of their front door. So it's the very local things often that make such a difference for people. And your examples there are fantastic. We knew about your community bus and some of the other things you've been doing, but to hear about your baby bank, your Christmas gift appeal, some amazing examples there. And we know because when you think about what happened with shielding, where the government tried to do this from Westminster, and I don't know what happened in other people's areas, but here in Stevenage, I had great big pantechnicons from, no doubt, from Tory crony companies turning up on the doorstep of 90-year-old people with 5-kilogram bags of pasta, which would probably last them several years, in fact. So they couldn't do that from Westminster. We took it over. We did it very successfully. And the kinds of things that you're talking about, you just cannot do if you try and do them centrally. And that's why devolution is so important. And let's crack on and get more and more Labour and co-op councillors and councils after the elections this year. I totally agree with you. A cooperative recovery is where we need to be. And as we're talking about cooperative recovery, what a great link in to our next speaker, who is Councillor Matthew Brown, leader of Preston Council. Some of us have heard before, and you're going to be lucky enough to hear tonight about the amazing work that Preston have done in terms of regenerating their economy with the people of Preston absolutely front and central of what they're doing. Over to you, Matthew.
Hi, well, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. It seems a very friendly, warm event. There's many people here, which is brilliant. So I'm going to speak about community wealth building for the next 10 minutes or so. These are really, really important elections coming up. There's no doubt about the importance of the elections that we're facing. It's been said quite eloquently already by Rosa and Andy about how we've got to have a different kind of economy, and that we've got to use either councils or where we have metro mayors to actually build that. Interesting today in the budget as well, because a lot of the rhetoric is stealing our clothes in many ways. But if you actually look underneath all the rhetoric and what they're announcing, there's very little of substance in there. We're still seeing, there's not an announcement the £20 uplift in universal credit is going to continue beyond the 6 months. There's going to be pay increases for working people. We've got the 5% council tax hike. And then the Northern Investment Bank, it's nowhere near what we need. 11 billion across all of the North. It probably needs to be 10 times that, to be honest. So it's very much illusionary what they're trying to do. They're trying to say that they're the friends of the North, but obviously they're the enemies of the North. And it's only ourselves in the Labour and Cooperative Party that can actually bring these ideas to scale, because we actually believe in them. So that's a really important point. So, I'll speak about Preston first. Firstly, within Preston, we realised that, the traditional way of doing things, just relying solely on big developers to come into the community and regenerate the city centre, that didn't work, because our economic development approach since the mid to late 90s was that you you know, you try to attract very large global developers, they then come into your city centre, you then use them to regenerate the city. And regardless of whether that was correct or incorrect, the reality is that by 2011, when we took control, the scheme that we tried to facilitate for over 10 years with big global developers, it didn't come to fruition. So the Preston model came out of a philosophical viewpoint, but it also came out of this reality that we had a Conservative government that was cutting back our budget every year. So we're spending 30 odd million, that was down to 20 odd million. And then big developers, big business didn't want to come into our city as well. So if you're left with that reality, you've really got no alternative but to try and take control yourself. So that's what we did with the Preston model and community wealth building. It's totally based around the principles of cooperation. It's based around the alternative economics of Mondragon in Spain and some of the work that's taking place in American cities now, involving you know, Cleveland and others, where they're getting very radical in terms of looking at the ownership of the local economy. So what we've done is we've put a number of these strategies together. We've also worked with our large public sector institutions like our universities and hospitals. And when you put that together, when you've got a Labour council or mayor or town council that goes to a hospital or university and says pay a living wage, buy local, employ local people, then it makes a big difference. And these policies are really crucial now because the pandemic has exposed what years of neoliberal economics, what years of inequality, what years of austerity has done to our communities. And it's you know, it's no coincidence that the minority communities in our city in Preston that have really been at the bottom end of the labour market for so long, they've been disproportionately affected, and that's happened in many places across the country. So it's our position. We've got to try where we're in power anyway to change the system as much as we can. We can't be skirting around the edges with a system that just works for the top 1%. I mean, Andy very eloquently mentioned about how, you know, how so many wealthy people got even wealthier during all this, you know, pain that we've suffered in the last few months. So, you know, we're trying to build that resilience and build that alternative. So the policies we've introduced are a number. Firstly, we pay a living wage as a council. We then go across the other public sector institutions and get them to pay the real living wage. So that's been successful. That's £9.50 an hour. Not only does the city council pay it, the county council pays it. Our university is moving towards it. The police pay it. The largest housing association pays it. One of the further education colleges, Newman College, pays it. You know, we've got a number of very big employers that pay the real living wage, and that's meant that in Lancashire, for female workers, I think 82% of female workers who work within our city are paid at least £9.50 an hour, compared to an average of 69% across Lancashire. It also meant that we supported a new credit union because one of ours went bust about 12 or 13 years ago. So we managed to persuade one nearby to expand to Preston. We've now got about 900 members. And again, it's the credit unions that have been lending during this pandemic, whereas the large banks often aren't. So we did that. But the biggest thing we've done so far is we've managed to, you know, say to our big institutions, our anchor institutions, you know, can you buy a lot more from Preston-based businesses? Don't always buy from outside corporations that don't pay the tax that the law intends. Can you buy from local SME companies in Preston? So, you know, we managed to work with the big institutions, and the figures we have from 3 years ago is they were spending an extra £75 million in the Preston economy, and that was often in construction and food and other quite large sectors in the economy, and that was equivalent to an extra 1,600 jobs for Preston. And again, since we've done that, we've managed to get the local NHS, hospital trust and the university behind it as well. So during the pandemic, the NHS bought masks locally from a company in Preston. And just that one contract worth about £2.5–3 million, it created 90 extra jobs in our community. So that spirit of community wealth building is really, it's really rippling through the Preston consciousness now, just across the community, but also with our big institutions and our businesses. So we've done that. We've got a public pension fund. Now, if you look at the wealth in either the Lancashire or the Greater Manchester or the Oxfordshire pension fund, you're talking billions. And often there's very little democratic control over these things. There's pension fund committees and there's trustees, but the culture often is that, you know, even they seem to be put pressure on to invest them in different places rather than their own local economies. So we've worked with our pension fund, and they're invested £100 million in the Preston and South Ribble economy, and want them to go further, considering investing even further in the clean energy sector in Preston and Lancashire. And just by shifting 2 or 3% of a public pension fund and persuading it to invest in the place where the money originates, it can create, hundreds, if not thousands of jobs by doing that. But we're now getting quite radical in the sense we're working with Preston Cooperative Development Network and the university as well in Preston to establish some worker-owned businesses. So we got funding for 10 worker co-ops. So there's 4 already, which are new and have been incubated. There's a food business, there's a digital business, there's a cooperative education centre, and there's also a taxi drivers are organising in the worker co-op. And they're doing that because the taxi drivers see the threat of Uber coming into our community that will undermine their livelihoods. So the managers self-organise in a worker cooperative, back with the trade union. And again, we've got about 15 in that already, but if you get to 200, you can see the kind of movements that you can get around cooperation by doing that. We're establishing a regional cooperative bank because we saw how the banks behaved running up to the 2007-8 economic crash. We saw that the reality was that the taxpayer had to pay £20,000 to bail out the financial system. And we now see that despite that public money, bankers are still getting huge bonuses. They don't lend to local businesses often, and they're also withdrawing from our high street. So we're working with Wirral and Liverpool councils to establish the North West Mutual, which will be one of the first regional cooperative banks in the UK, actually. We've never had them in the UK. We've had them in Germany, but we've not really had regional cooperative banks in the UK for a number of decades, if at all. So once this gets a banking licence, it can expect to lend, I think, about £400 or £500 million after 8 years. And crucially, that'll lend to local businesses and people as well, who the mainstream banking system neglects. And the poverty premium of not having a current account, it's about £1,000 really. So again, if we're serious about tackling the most marginalised in our community, we've got to look at having alternatives to the mainstream banking system. And unlike a credit union or a CDFI, if you have a fully licensed bank, it'll lend to both individuals and businesses. And obviously, we need to support credit unions and CDFIs as well, but we need an alternative to the mainstream banks that can compete with them. So we're also building stuff now, and instead of holding the hands of large developers that will come and go as they so choose, we're actually developing a cinema ourselves that'll be in local public ownership. £35 million, it's going to be a cinema development in the city centre. If we don't do it, large developers aren't going to do it. But crucially, when we build it, we'll be able to have a say over local suppliers, the labour standards and the environmental standards of the building. And crucially, any profits that go back to the cinema will actually come to us because it will be in municipal ownership. So the profits will go back to us as well. And then crucially, community wealth building and these cooperative ideas, they are now an international movement. So we relaunched our community wealth building strategy last Thursday. And it was a very exciting event. We had John McDonnell, the former Shadow Chancellor, Neil McInroy from Clares, Rachel Shabby, the Guardian journalist, lots of fantastic local speakers. But the main speaker actually was a guy called Philip Thompson, who's one of the deputy mayors of New York City. And, he was talking about how in New York, they feel their economic system isn't working for them. So they're establishing cooperative businesses, they're supporting employee ownership, looking at community land trusts, looking at food purchasing co-ops, which we're looking at as well. We've established 3 where the community can actually come together and organising cooperatives to actually reduce the price of food. So that's really exciting. And potentially you've got even more mainly democratic cities that are getting quite radicalised in America. They're also on the community wealth building agenda. So we can then link up people like Andy and others. Obviously, I'm much smaller in my council, but there's a movement we can create across both the UK and the US where we link up the cities and regions in both America and the UK where they're implementing community wealth building. Because you're seeing, whether it's in Greater Manchester, whether it's in Whitney, whether it's in Plymouth, or even if it's in Cleveland or New York or Chicago, you're seeing how the economic system isn't working for people. And the conversations about who actually owns the economy and whether we locally and regionally, where we're in power, can we do something about it? Can we actually create more opportunities of public and cooperative ownership locally? Those conversations weren't taking place 10 or 15 years ago. So this is why these elections are really exciting, because, we've got some fantastic candidates, whether it's, obviously we got Tracy was mentioned in Yorkshire, we've got Jessie Joe, we've got Liam Byrne. They've all got these agendas where they're saying, well, we want to have our own bank, we want to expand the cooperative economy, we want to look at cooperative housing, we want to look at our own energy companies. And those conversations weren't taking place 10 years ago. So it's only us really that has the courage and the conviction to actually stick up for our communities and actually deliver the kind of cooperative values and cooperative ownership, crucially, that's actually needed in our communities. And the Tories are using this rhetoric, and they're being very clever, but obviously we need to, you know, get stuck into these elections, inspire enough people to come and support us, get out on the streets, obviously within a social distance, of course, if we can do that, or get on the phone and make sure we win, because, you know, the system is letting people down. And you saw that with the pandemic, and it's only us that has the courage to actually say we're going to try and create something better and newer, and actually make sure that everyone shares in the resources which they produce locally. So these elections are really important. We want to make sure we do very well. So, you know, lovely to be asked to speak. Fantastic speakers as well. Lovely hearing from yourself, Sharon, Rosa, and Andy. You know, and let's actually get to it. Let's win those elections in May, and let's try and make sure we get the message out to everyone that, you know, after this dreadful collective trauma that we've had, you know, it doesn't have to be this way. We can actually not have this level of poverty and inequality and life expectancy differences. And to do that, we need to win power and have a set of policies that's going to appeal to people. So thank you very much.
That's absolutely brilliant, Matthew, and we're so proud of what you're doing there. And I think the thing that always strikes me when I hear you talking about Preston is the absolutely holistic nature of how you're embedding these cooperative principles and the community wealth building throughout everything you do as a council, but also throughout the anchor institutions that you've got involved in your economy up there. It's really impressive, and we're really proud of it. And it was great to hear about, I couldn't join in your relaunch the other day, but great to hear that you've got the Deputy Mayor of New York there with you. I went to New York a couple of years ago, and they do need some help over there with cooperative principles. There's a lot of poverty there, but you know, this community wealth building is definitely the link, as I see it, to a cooperative and green recovery. And there's never been more need for that, because I don't know how many of you watched David Harewood's really powerful documentary last night about how minority ethnic people have been affected far worse by the COVID pandemic. That is also true of deprived communities in many of the areas we represent. It has definitely been a pandemic that's hit those who were the most vulnerable the worst, and that's true to say. And now we have the task of building a recovery that turns that around and makes those who most need the help get the most help. So thank you for that fantastic exposition from Preston, as ever, Matthew. Delighted to hear you speak again. And now I'm going to introduce Tudor Evans, who is the leader of Plymouth City Council. Plymouth do some absolutely amazing things. I can hardly keep up with all the innovation and initiative that comes from Plymouth. They produced two fantastic reports last year for the Co-op Councils Network, the Cooperatives Unleashed and the Cities of Service report, a big launch, again with a link into the United States on Cities of Service. They are doing some amazing work, and I hope we're going to hear about some of it now. Over to you, Tudor.
Thanks very much indeed, Sharon. I think the people deserve an explanation as to your fishy reference and the cooking. And I'll come to that in a minute if I get the opportunity. But I really would like to thank the party for the opportunity to address everybody today, and to appeal to everybody who wants to see Plymouth City Council retain its control by Labour and Co-op. You know, you're always welcome to join one of our dialogue calls. They're happening 3 times a day, and at the time of your convenience. Anyway, I just wanted to just lay a few things on you. I don't get many national platforms, to be honest with you, and when I do, my internet seems to fail. So I'll try and race through. Basically, this is a bit of a list, Sharon, rather than a coherent speech. But what it does demonstrate, I think, is the value of having Labour and Cooperative council control and what can happen when you got it. And of course it can happen when you're in opposition, but when you get the chance of leading a council and making policy for a council, you can do some extraordinary things. So I just wanted to highlight a few things. So in 2018, we launched our Co-op and Mutuals Action Plan. You referred to it really, which was to double the size of our cooperative economy by 2025. And we started by having a baseline survey of what we were currently doing. Since we launched that report, we've had 4 new co-op businesses registered in the city. Now that brings us up to 29 co-ops and mutuals. By the way, speaking of mutuals, I've got a confession to make. I'm a banker. Yes, you heard that right. Plymouth City Council was a founder member of the Southwest Mutual, which is an investment mutual that has been set up to try and support business across the Southwest, co-op businesses across the Southwest. Anyway, going back to the size of the co-op economy in Plymouth, 250 jobs, 10,000 members, so it's big news. The newest of these is called the Village Hub. This is basically, at the moment, during the pandemic, a place where people can visit, can get support, but it will transform post-COVID into a community cafe. And it's been run by and through the efforts of one of our cooperative pioneers in Stoke Village's cooperative store. But it'll reach out to people across the city. It's fantastic. We set up a £1.2 million co-op and the Mutuals Investment Fund. So that's where the money for the mutual bank came from. That's going to open in 2022. But we have got a pipeline of projects of £350,000, Sharon. There's 1,000 organisations trading in social purpose within Plymouth at the moment. That includes 800 charities and 175 community interest companies. In 2020, 8 new CICs registered in the city. Our new community asset transfer and use policy adopted in 2020 has enabled a meanwhile use programme. So empty properties that the council has owned gets used by other people. The first of those was a school uniform shop opening to help families that are in school uniform costs at the moment to get access to uniform. And the team is currently working on 11 more sites for community asset transfer. Now, we're doing our economic reset and we've called it Resurgam. And that's because, not because we've all gotten posh and public school on everybody, but after the Blitz in Plymouth, somebody nailed a sign above the St. Andrew's Church saying, Resurgam, I will rise again. And we've adopted that name for our economic reset post-COVID. So it is about building back better, actually, but we really mean it. It's about equality. It's about nobody getting left behind. It's about making sure that the communities that have suffered the most during COVID aren't the ones that suffer the most economically going forward. And that's really important. So how are we doing that? So Resurgam basically comprises of a number of key pillars. Local purchasing is kind of fundamental to that, keeping the money circulating in the local economy. So the City Council set ourselves an ambitious target of increasing the amount of money we spent locally by 10% over 2 years. So that would take it to 54%. Well, let me tell you that in 9 months, we'd actually achieved 60% local purchasing in our locality, which I think is pretty amazing. So what does that mean in money terms? That's £110 million a year going into local business. So that's a real commitment to local purchasing and local supply. Social value is a big issue for us. We've got the growth board, the private sector-led growth board to adopt, basically, or about to adopt social value policies, which is a real breakthrough for us in terms of that. And I think, again, the pandemic and the way in which people have pulled together during the pandemic, it's actually, I think people now understand social value a lot more and are willing to embrace it. We've got a whole host of things we've done in terms of re-engineering the council's procurement policies, actually, to benefit local suppliers, and issued a support guide for officers on how to buy local. Because you've got to remember, a lot of officers been in local government a long time. I mean, they remember compulsory competitive tendering and they've been brought up in a particular way. So you have to help them with this journey, and a style guide on how to do it is not a daft idea. Last week, we launched a new supplier directory to try and encourage more and more local people to buy locally, procurement people to buy locally, including our health service and our police service, both of whom have committed to doing more to buy locally from Plymouth firms going forward. Sharon, as usual, I can tell you loads of stuff about what we're doing in Plymouth, but I do need to talk to you about these things. We have a campaign to support our local fishing industry, Call for Fish, which started as a project of the local Britain's first electronic fish market, which was a cooperative fish market. And they basically, when the COVID and the Brexit have collapsed the fishing markets, restaurant markets in particular, they went door to door, and we helped. And I helped by cooking live once a week. The most terrifying thing you can do, I think. But it's to encourage people to eat more locally caught fish, and it's great. We've got loads of policies on the environment. We reintroduced 2 beavers into Plymouth over the last couple of months, and they're getting on fine, actually. We've got a fantastic project, Future Parks Accelerator, a new model for how we can get social entrepreneurs, cooperative entrepreneurs going forward to produce to sustain our parks and open spaces. We've got a great model which we'd like you to have a look at, and we're doing that in partnership with Plymouth University, Real Ideas Organisation, Data Place and the National Trust. We've got Green Minds, which aims to create new models of community stewardship for natural spaces. And again, you know, particularly important in the urban environment, I think, working alongside local people to provide 10,000 volunteer opportunities, training courses, new apprenticeships, new digital tools, and there's loads of stuff, including a 360-degree virtual dome. No, I mean, it is a real dome, and inside it projects digital high definition quality stuff, which is going to be an absolute, it's the largest of its kind in Europe. And it's run by basically a cooperative organisation in the heart of one of our most deprived communities. Stunning stuff. And I haven't really got time to talk to you about Plymouth Energy Community, which was a co-op that we set up 6 years ago now, an energy cooperative, initially to do switching, but it's turned into an energy generating co-op and providing loads of energy advice and support on things like insulation, lowering fuel bills, ending fuel poverty, and so on. You know, through this project, we've avoided 18,000 tonnes of carbon emissions. We've saved schools and community organisations nearly £750,000 through a variety of energy efficient improvements. We've developed a huge amount of clean power from community-owned solar farm, 32 solar arrays we've got, and we've got a number of community investment and investors in this project. You have to be a community investor to invest. What does PEC do? PEC is really transforming the way in which we do energy in this city. I'm absolutely delighted that we've done that. And of course, last but not least, Cooperative. Cooperative is our cooperative food company, which we own, the City Council, in conjunction with 70 schools, I think 68 schools in Plymouth. What does that do? That feeds hungry children during the holidays. It provides top quality meals when they are at school, using locally sourced organic produce, proper stuff, and it also helps to feed the elderly. We're really proud of Cooperative, really proud of PEC, Plymouth Energy Community, and there are a whole host of other things that we'd be glad to share with people if ever they get the chance to get on a train and come and see us. Thank you, Sharon.
Absolutely fantastic, Tudor. Thank you very much indeed. And, you know, there are so many things going on in Plymouth. As I said, it's hard to keep up. It makes me breathless listening to all of the initiatives that you and your team down there do in Plymouth. And It's been amazing to see the way that you've picked that up since you took control of that council, and really made such a huge difference in Plymouth. And anyone who's listening who is in opposition at the moment, just listen to Tudor and his team. They were very well prepared. They knew what they wanted to do when they got into power, and look at the stuff they've been, you know, it's important to hit the ground running if you do take control of your council, and that's exactly what you all did there. And, you know, one of the other things that you didn't mention, Tudor, but which I think is amazing, we all know the cultural sector's had a massive hit during the pandemic, and I know you've got your, is it called the box, if I got that right, at Plymouth to support your cultural elements in the town, and that's great to see too. And the one thing you've done for me personally, I'm terrified of cooking fish, because I live about as far as it's possible to get from anything that looks like sea. So we have to be very careful with fish here. But you make it look so straightforward that I don't think anyone watching you do one of your recipes would be frightened of buying some fish and getting on with cooking it. You mentioned the issue around the growth board in your area, and I think this is a really important part of being in control. One of the things that we've done here, I'm on the Hertfordshire Growth Board and part of the Local Enterprise Partnership in Hertfordshire. We are the only Labour council in Hertfordshire. We've now got a Liberal Democrat shared administration as well, which is fantastic. But we're the only Labour council, and we've managed to somehow sneak in community wealth building, both to the Growth Board and to the Local Enterprise Partnership. And it was fantastic today to find out that we've been granted 37.5 million from the Towns Fund in, you know, as part of the agenda that's been announced today. And the great thing for me is that community wealth building is right at the heart of that. I don't know if the people that have given the funding out realise that yet, but they will do when we start working on our projects here. So it's amazing what you can do, and that sense of you having prepared, got into power, taking control of your council and delivering over and over again for the people of Plymouth. We've seen it from Preston, from Matthew tonight. We've seen it from Rosa in a town council, how she delivers there for her people, and we've certainly seen it from Andy up there in Manchester. So you drive all this from opposition too. So if you're in opposition, there is so much you can do from opposition too. So thank you all, fantastic presentations from all of you. We're going to open up for some questions now, and I had two in the chat box already, so I'll start with those two. We had one from Jill, which is a really important one about what people are doing about International Women's Day. If you're on the call still, Jill, I'd love to bring you in on that one. And it's to do with International Women's Day. And Jill kindly mentioned, and I would like to pay tribute to Jerry Miller from Lee, who sadly died last week. Jerry was one of those great champions of the WASPy movement. Now I'm one of the WASPy women. I was born in the 50s and had 6 years locked off my pension. I still haven't got it. For most of us, it's about £42,000 that we lost. Some of them were a lot more than that. It's great to hear the story of Jerry. Sadly, passed away now. We're still fighting for the WASPy women. So are you still on the call, Jill?
Yes, I am.
Okay, lovely. Do you want to come in and make your comments and ask your question about International Women's Day?
Oh, hi. Yes, I just wanted to ask Andy if he was able to make a tribute to Jerry, and also just how he thinks the WASPy challenge, if you like, these days, how it's likely to be after all the COVID interruptions. We've had JR, judicial review interruptions as well, but obviously, you know, there was a way of trying to get something done, but now that's been taken away from a lot of us and it's not going to happen. But also, you know, we've got the PHSO involved as well, so there's quite a lot that needs still to be done, but of course we've had to hold off all, as everybody has, because of COVID. How does Andy Burnham feel that we might have a future in still challenging and pushing forward and not going away like we always say? So,
and whereabouts in the country are you?
Well,
Jill?
I've taken over Northampton at the moment, but I actually started off in West Sussex, in Bognor and Littlehampton, Chichester. And my main reason for doing that is because I had to downsize and sell my home from the upper level of West Sussex and moved down to the south a bit more, because, you know, I was told in 2016 that I was going to be having to wait another 3 years for my pension, which I didn't expect because I thought I'd be 62 and something. So that meant I had to move down, and then because I needed new social life and that sort of thing, I already knew about WASPI by courtesy of Angela Rippon and Rip Off Britain, and then I started the group up. So down there, and I was running that for about 3 years. But my personal life's changed a bit, so now I'm up in Northampton, so that's where I am.
Okay, well, it's lovely. It's lovely to hear from you, Andy. If you're still on the call, did you know about Jerry? I'm not sure Andy's been able to stay with us, Jill, but we'll pass on your comments.
Okay, yes,
and you know, I would certainly pay. I met Jerry at a couple of conferences, and I'd certainly pay my own tribute to her. She was wonderful, and we need to keep fighting for WASPI.
Yes.
So, thank you very much for your contribution.
You're welcome.
And sorry, I was supposed to tell you this, Izzy, but I've now got Callie Harris, and then the next question is from Matthew Snape. So, Callie, if we can bring you in, and you've got some questions about what's going to happen with leafleting in the election, and my own particular topic that I'm absolutely passionate about, and that's social housing. Are you on the call, Callie?
Sorry. Hello, can you hear
Hello,
me? Sorry,
Kelly.
sorry, my camera is not working, hence
don't worry, we can hear
you cannot see me. I apologize for that.
So tell us where you are, Callie.
Yeah, I'm based in Rugby, so I'm part of the Coventry and Rugby co-op movement. That's where I'm based, in the Midlands. So
self-view.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Just ask your question.
Yeah. Yeah, I just came across, I'm a co-op party member, but I just came across Unlocked Democracy that there's going to be some restrictions when it comes to posting leaflets and campaigning. And I do understand the COVID restrictions, but does anyone know about how the campaign will take place because of COVID? That's something that worries me. And again, this government is not widely advertising postal voting, so we do need to get the vote out. And I wonder what you're doing in your areas to make sure that people vote. And again, in my area, we had loads of dodgy developments and the infrastructure. We don't have enough schools and hospitals. And that had a knock-on effect of all the local provisions and what's happening in our area. So I am a bit worried, and I don't know if you had similar experiences in your areas, but we had loads of dodgy developers around here. So
okay, thank you very much for your question, Callie. I'm going to ask our panel to come in with any comments. So unfortunately, Rosa's had to leave us for another meeting, and so has Andy. But hopefully we've still got Matthew and Tudor. Matthew, do you want to make any comments on Callie's questions, please?
Yeah, which ones do you want me to answer specifically?
So she mentioned campaigning during the COVID crisis, and also I think Callie has some questions around social housing and how we can get social housing instead of the dodgy developers that she's been experiencing in her area.
Yeah, no, very good. Your campaigning, obviously, we've not, as a party, you know, we've not been leafleting for some time. I think all the Lib Dems have been actually, in you know, before the lockdown. So we've taken a safety first approach. We've been doing much more in terms of telephoning people through dialogue. We've been doing that. We've been doing a lot more on social media. We're going to have a number but we'll have a lot more online rallies in Preston and events and other things we're looking at as part of the campaign. Obviously, we can now, from the 8th of March, my understanding is within groups of 2 deliver leaflets and potentially canvas as well. But, you know, I think we've got to do it really safely, because it'll cost us if we're seen to be, you know, putting party politics above, you know, the community, you know, and I think we've got to really keep in mind how we do that. So I think a variety of methods is worth doing it, but I think the product to sell is also really important. So, you know, we've got to go with a set of policies and ideas that will inspire people enough to So I think if we put that together, it's got a good opportunity.
People have been on here. How many people do you need?
Well, there was 7 screens, so that's 100.
Sorry,
Okay.
Matthew, do carry on. Do carry on. I think that was just someone that left their mic on by accident.
That's fine. And in terms of social housing, yeah, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because what we're getting is the government, the Tories actually, we have these viability assessments where if the developers don't make a profit of, I think, 15 to 20% on certain developments, they can actually not have the affordable housing requirement through the planning process. Now, in Preston, we've had that for about 10 years. So, you know, if it's 15 houses or more, if it's got to be at least 30% affordable housing. So that's brought hundreds of affordable housing units into Preston, but that's being taken away to some degree because you're getting all these pleas from developers that they're not making the 15 to 20% profits that they need. So I think an alternative to that is what we're considering, because we don't have a stock, we've not had a stock for over 15 years, is establishing a company where we can develop ourselves. So we're looking at that as well. But we're also making the case, or we'll be doing soon, to the Homes England, that we should be supported to re-establish a housing revenue account because, you know, even the LGA, which is Conservative dominated, is saying we need 100,000 social houses a year, built by councils mainly, to actually help the low-paid workers who got us through the pandemic. Because the people who got us through the pandemic are, you know, retail workers, care workers, those in the gig economy. And if you're having houses being built which cost, you know, a lot, and you're not getting the levels of social and affordable housing needed, it's a problem. So we've got to try and do things our own way, as I said before, with the Preston model. And I think if that is councils setting up their own companies, then I think that's something that needs to be done because the free market ain't going to do it for us. And as you know, developers aren't in it for charity often. They're in it to make as much profit as they can out of communities. And if they can extract lots of wealth out of us, then we'll do that. So, you know, if that is happening and we can't deliver what we need for the people, we've got to create alternatives. So I hope that's okay.
That's brilliant, Matthew.
Sure.
Thank you. And the issue around wholly owned companies, we've set one up now in Stevenage. We've built 248 homes already in council homes in Stevenage. We've got another 280 which are currently under construction, even in spite of the COVID crisis. And we've got another 800 in the design and planning phases. And we've done that. We've had to build some private homes to sell because that's how we fund those council homes that I just spoke about. That's how we fund them. And we do all that through the wholly owned company. It belongs to the people of Stevenage. The profits get recycled into building council homes, which is what we really need locally. So there's lots of examples of that all over the country. And just quickly for Jill, somebody's put in the chat for us that Central England Co-op have got a Women's Day event. It's from 3 to 5 o'clock on Monday. And the details of how to get onto that are in the chat line. So you can have a look in there and find the link for that. Tudor, housing, social housing.
Just a few things on those. Anyway, we haven't had an HRA now for about years. I had to go external with our housing because Phil Willis wouldn't give me any money at the time to regenerate an entire post-war housing estate. But anyway, another story. Look, we've issued now, I think, 3 plans for homes. Why is that important? Because as a result of the plans for homes, we've delivered 5,500 homes over the last 5 years, right? So that's 1,100 homes per year. Now, that's not all council building, by the way. That's just us keeping up with those in demand. So we know what the demand is over the next 25 years. We got a land and housing supply to match it. We've got it enshrined in the local plan. And so we know where the growth will be. We've also got the support of our neighbours. So we are one of only, I think, 11 joint local plans in the country at the moment. So we're comfortable with what we're trying to do. But just to put that in context, before Labour issued those plans for homes, Sharon, housing delivery was only about 600 starts in Plymouth a year. So we've doubled that. 27% of all new homes in the city over the last 5 years have been provided as affordable, including homes for social rent and supported housing schemes to meet the needs of the most vulnerable. Now, that's an actual figure. So that's not the claimed planning, you know, oh, yes, we insisted that it was 25%, but nobody built any houses because it was too high. This is actually delivering 27%, okay? And one of the things we've been doing as well as part of that plan for homes is releasing council-owned sites for housing. And through the release of land, I mean, we're not giving it away, we're selling it, but making it available. We find, you know, through an up-to-date asset and land register, I mean, we prioritise that, but we managed to deliver 1,800 homes that way. And that's fantastic. At the moment, sorry, 1,000 are being completed, 175 under construction, more to come. We've done a number of massive estate regeneration projects in my own ward in North Prospect, in Devonport, in another part of the town, and also Barnbarton. These are the 3 most deprived communities in Plymouth, okay? And that's meant 3,000 new properties and £400 million of investment in the total over the last 10 years. We're currently working on community-led housing to deliver 150 new homes that will be owned and managed by community-led housing providers. And we're embarking on direct delivery of new homes to establish a Plymouth Home standard for post-COVID living to drive up good design, quality and sustainable and flexible living. And last but not least, we launched the Plymouth Eco Homes programme to deliver 250 low carbon and net zero homes. So we're doing our bit.
Fantastic, Tudor, thank you. I was pretty sure Plymouth would be doing some stuff on housing, so that's great to hear. And of course, we do have a fantastic campaigning champion in Jo Fortune on the call. So, Jo, do you want to comment on Callie's points about campaigning?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sharon. And if there's ever been an explanation of why my enthusiasm for cooperators being elected, I haven't heard a better hour. Which we've just had as well, I should say. Just on the point, and as Matthew alludes to, in terms of a loosening and a change to local election campaigning regulation and restriction, if you like, which Matthew alludes to in England. What I would encourage Callie and everyone on the call to be doing is making sure that you're visiting the Candidate and Election Hub on the Co-op Party's website. We have got all the guides you'll find necessary, not just in terms of here and now, but also within changed circumstance where you may be able to leaflet and other aspects. When I was talking, I mentioned not just the DM, the direct mail and early voting materials which are available from the Labour Party and the Cooperative Party, but also hinted towards leaflets and other aspects as well. So have a look on the Candidate Hub, have a look on the Election Hub. If you're not, if you're on the call and you're not within the local government WhatsApp group, make sure that you are putting yourself forward there. There's another great source of information and mutual support for cooperative councillors and candidates there. And also making sure that you're receiving all of the Cooperative Party local updates and emails to make sure that you're on top of where we're up to in terms of the election, but also making sure that it's safe and appropriate as well. So just a few plugs for the different ways in which you can find that information from the Cooperative Party. And just as Sharon, just before, ever so briefly, just on International Women's Day, as you would imagine, the Cooperative Party has got large events planned, online events planned for International Women's Day. I know that we've got plans as well, working with Tracy Brabham, who's been mentioned on this call previously as well. So you'll be seeing content coming out from Tracy on today as well. But I just did want to pick up on the WASPy point as well, just to say that we have a fantastic new chair of the party, Jim McMahon, MP, being mentioned by yourself as being formative within the CCIN foundation and start, if you like. Jim, allied with his shadow cabinet colleagues, Preet Gill, who's the chair of our parliamentary group, and Jonathan Reynolds, who's Labour and Cooperative shadow DWP. You certainly have some very vociferous champions for WASPy women at the leadership parts of the party in Westminster as well. So, but I will take those concerns back from Jill and make sure that those 3 people certainly hear them from this call tonight as well.
That's brilliant, Jo. Thank you very much. And some fantastic campaigning events that the co-op parties put on. And do check out that councillors WhatsApp group, because there's loads going on in there, and many of our co-op councillors take the opportunity to use it to promote their own dialogue sessions. And you know, you can use it for yours too if you want to, but also amazing events that we see going on through the Cooperative Party. Now, we've only got about 4 more minutes left, 3 or 4 more minutes left. So First of all, I'd say to Matthew, who was interested, Tudor, in how you're doing things in Plymouth, I'm sure they can look at the Plymouth City Council website. You'll find lots of information there, and the Co-op Council's Innovation Network website, where you'll see the Cities of Service document, the Cooperatives Unleashed document. There's loads of information about how Plymouth, or contact Tudor direct. I'm sure he'd be happy to let you know just how they've done things. That would be great. And Steve Garlick wanted to talk about town centres. Lots of us have done amazing things with town centre work. I know Tudor's done some in Plymouth, Matthew's done some in Preston. We've certainly, I've got £1 billion town centre project, which was what that 37.5 million today is partly towards. So there is lots going on. And the thing about, I would say about that is that it's important to build in your community wealth building as you do your regeneration. Town centres can't rely just on retail now, they can't. You've got to have residential, you've got to have flexible working space, you've got to have leisure, culture, all those things. It's got to be one big package of stuff, because retail won't sustain the cost of a town centre anymore. So there are lots of things to think about there. If Shobha Srivastava wants to come in very quickly, just for one last quick point, Shobha, we'll bring you in.
There we are. I'm unmuted now. Thank you very much. And I'm Shobha. I live in South Shields, the area that's forgotten by everybody. I think in general, the whole of Northeast is not talked about anywhere. I live in an area where we've got a lot of Black and minority ethnic communities, especially from Bangladesh. And as you know, the majority of them run restaurants. So their livelihood have been lost. And therefore the women are suffering more than anybody else. A woman came crying to us in my charity, saying that she'd never ever cooked 3 meals a day for 9 people, and that she had to do that now, including for the 6 children that they've got, and the parents-in-law as well. So I've got a lot to say, but I will not. I just want everybody to know that these communities need to be looked at. And as you know, and others have said as well, that the BME communities have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And we can see, I can see in my own charity, which is known as Apna Ghar, means our home. It's hardly our home now because, you know, the center's closed. However, our staff are working round the clock trying to help in any way we can. But having said that, I mean, we have a Labour council, and I've been a Labour Party member forever, from the time I ever came to the UK. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I did come to the UK. And yet I find that the values of Labour and the equality of care for everybody seems to have been, I'm not talking against my council at all. They all know me and I know them very well. I've lived here 40 years, so you can imagine how much I like this area. I wouldn't live anywhere else. You get the best people in the whole of UK. So please remember us. And I would like to know the policies that the cooperatives are trying to bring for the BME communities and for people like me who want to work with them still at this old age. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, that's brilliant. That's brilliant, Shobha. Thank you very much. Very powerful advocacy for the Northeast there. We didn't have a Northeast speaker tonight, but we very often do on these calls. And I know you've got lots of champions of your area because I hear them speaking very often and in events just like this. Do look out for further events because there will be things in there for talking about just the issues that you've raised this evening, equalities for women, for minority ethnic groups, and for those people whose businesses have been particularly hit by the pandemic. I do need to close the session now. I'm really, really grateful to all of our speakers, to Joe, to Matthew, to Andy, to Tudor and to Rosa. I think that's been an amazing session this evening. We've heard so much, and it just shows you, as everyone said, what cooperators can do when they get into power and work for their communities. And we really, truly can have a cooperative-led green recovery to this pandemic. We have led, supported, and worked with our communities all the way through the pandemic. We now need to do the same through the recovery. Thank you all so much for listening. It's been an amazing evening as far as I'm concerned. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you especially to our amazing Cooperative Party for organising this for us all. Really grateful to you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm off to my Co-op Party branch meeting now, so thank you all very much indeed. Lovely to see you all.